Well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to wait another minute for more folks to jump on and then we'll get started. Well, welcome everyone to our program tonight on cicadas. Jamie mentioned we're one of her last programs that she's presenting on this topic. So we will get started in just a minute. Before I turn it over to her, I just want to mention a couple of things happening at the library this week. We do have a summer kickoff party on Wednesday. We have Joey's Gelato and Italian ice truck that will be parked in front of the library from 4 to 6 o'clock in the evening. So stop by, show your library card, and get a free cup or cone of gelato for a couple hours on Wednesday night. While you're here, if you have young children, you can register for our summer reading clubs or teens. All of our reading programs are in session right now, so be sure to participate or go onto our website to learn more about any of those. We also have a program, another Zoom program on Wednesday, June 5th. After you eat your gelato at the library, run home and turn on your computer and sign up for a program called Engineering Feats of the Columbian Exposition. That should be a lot of fun. And it's with a new presenter who has come highly recommended to us. So it should be a fun evening. I think that's all I have as far as upcoming announcements. We are recording tonight's session, so if for some reason you want to replay any of it or have to log out early, it will be up on our YouTube channel for 2 weeks, probably starting tomorrow. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jamie Vibach. She is an educator with the Illinois Extension, and she has agreed to present our program tonight. I know she's done quite a few of these over the last few months, so I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Jamie. Thank you for joining us tonight. Also, if you have any questions at any point during the program, please go ahead and type them into the Q&A, and Jamie or myself will go through them at the end of her program and make sure all your questions are answered. Thank you for joining us, Jamie.
Thanks, Valerie. And thank you to the library for having me out tonight. Um, I'm really sorry I'm not a library patron up there because the gelato sounds delicious. And fun fact, the ice cream cone was developed at the Chicago World's Fair. So good tie-in for that. So I'm full of all kinds of useless knowledge. So hi everybody, I'm Jamie Vibach. I am with the Illinois Extension. We're part of the University of Illinois. My office is based in Naperville, though. People always ask me, what is the extension? And the best way I can describe what the extension is, back in the day when there were a lot of farmers around, there was all this great research on new agricultural techniques being developed at the university. And they needed to get that information out to the farmers where it would actually be useful. So they developed extensions of the university throughout the state where they could have educators like myself who could then go around to the farmers and spread that knowledge. Now, since we are not all farming communities anymore here in Illinois, we as educators sort of branch out into different areas. So my focus or my major area of interest is native plants. So I do a lot of presentations on native plants and native wildlife as well. And so it was very exciting to have the cicadas come out here because it was a great chance for me to uh, really do a deep dive and talk to some entomologists and um, really learn as much as I possibly can so that I can now share that all with you. And as Valerie mentioned, uh, you're actually kind of lucky having being one of the last presentations because this is really one of the first presentations I've done since they have come out so much. So you're getting a lot of new photos that I have just taken recently. So a little, like I said, a little bit about my background. I have a master's degree from Governor State University down here. I'm in the southwest suburbs, and my master's is in environmental biology. So looking at ecology and communities of organisms and things. So anytime we have a special phenomenon like this, I always find it to be very exciting. So let's dive in. So if we look at the life cycle of the cicada, let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. So if we start in the upper right-hand corner there, you've got the two adults. They're making googly eyes at each other, I guess. The female is then going to lay her eggs in the branches, the outermost branches of trees, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And then anywhere from 2 to 17 years later, depending on what kind of cicada we're talking about. Well, those eggs are then going to hatch. The nymphs are going to fall down into the soil. They're going to burrow down and spend the next 2 to 17 years underground, chewing on the roots, not so much chewing, but their mouth parts are basically like a straw. So they approach these roots kind of like a Capri Sun. That straw is just going to go in and they're going to sip out some of the nectar, the tree sap, essentially out of the roots. So after 2 to 17 years, sometimes more, sometimes less, they are going to come to the surface. They're going to wait till that soil temperature reaches about 64 degrees Fahrenheit at 8 inches underground. And then they're going to find the first vertical surface they can find and climb. And they have to climb because they've got to be able to hang after they molt so that their wings can dry properly. If they're not able to hang right, if they have to, they're lean up against something or they get trampled on while those wings are drying, their wings can come out kind of deformed and they won't be able to fly. So they got to be able to climb something and hang, let those wings dry nice and straight so that they can fly better. Then once they are all dry and ready to go, they are going to climb up into the trees. The males are going to start to sing and they're going to start looking for a mate. So we've got a couple of different kinds we're going to talk about tonight. We've got the periodic cicadas. Those are the ones that are out right now. And then we have our annual cicadas, also known as the dog day cicadas, that'll be coming out a little bit later. So as I mentioned, this is one of the first presentations I've given since they came out. So, but I just want to say I have been predicting for about the last 2 to 3 months that they were going to come out the second or third week of May. And that has to do with the soil temperatures. So those soil temperatures, the university keeps track. They have a number of different monitoring stations throughout the state, and you can create your own account on there if you want to. It's totally free. You can see the websites down there. It's the Warm Water and Atmospheric Resources Monitoring Program. So they've got soil temperature information, rain information, all kinds of stuff like that. And like air temperature and all that too. And so you can look, if you look at the last few years at when the soil temperatures hit that magic 64-degree level, you'll notice it's always right around the middle of May. So in 2022, it happened on May 12th. 2023, last year, it was a little bit later. So May 29th was when it finally reached that magic temperature. And so this year, we were watching it just kind of bounce all over the place for a little while. As of May 14th, it was at 63 degrees. And it was just really a couple of days later that it hit that magic 64 degrees. And that's really when they started coming out. So now the soil temperature is up to about 66, 67 degrees. So they're definitely out and out in force right now. They're going to last about 4 to 6 weeks. So probably by the 4th of July, they should be gone. So if you are experiencing them, if you are going deaf from them, like I feel like I am sometimes walking past certain trees, just know they'll be gone soon. So enjoy it while it lasts. So let's talk a little bit about what exactly we mean when we talk about the broods. So a brood is just a group of cicadas that come out each year. So there are multiple species generally involved within a brood. So the ones that are out right now, there are actually 4 different periodical cicada species that are out. And they're kind of hard to tell apart. There's a few visual differences. Mostly you can tell them apart by the sound. But there are 12 broods of cicadas with 17-year life cycles. So notice there have actually been a few that have gone extinct. So that's why there's only 12 and not 17. So there are some that just, they were in a small enough area or something. I don't know, to be perfectly honest, but so there are 12 broods and 3 broods with 13-year life cycles. Each one gets assigned a Roman numeral. So the brood that is out right now is called brood 13. And the 13-year group of cicadas that's out right now is group 19. So those are, as you can tell from the map, more in southern Illinois, central to southern Illinois, whereas that 17-year is definitely more in northern Illinois. Not that you would know it from what every newspaper and TV station has been telling us about these, that dual brood. And it is very exciting that they're both coming out at the same time, but they were making it sound like it's going to cover the whole state, and it's not. But estimates do say that the 2 broods combined could produce more than 1 trillion cicadas. And that brood sinking is something that happens only every 221 years. So this is the first time these 2 broods have been out at the same time since 1803. Those females then that come out, they're going to lay up to 600 eggs each. And unfortunately, though, they have about a 98% mortality rate underground. So you think about what could happen in the ensuing 17 years. They're dependent on trees to survive. So if that tree gets cut down above ground, they can survive for a little bit on those roots, but eventually they're going to run out of food unless there are, tree roots nearby that they can get to easily. They're going to die out. So if we have a forested area that gets cut down and paved over, any cicadas that are down there aren't going to make it. So a lot can happen in those 17 years. Just for fun, let's look at what happened the last time both these broods came out at the same time in 1803. Thomas Jefferson was president. The Louisiana Purchase happened. Ohio became a state. Illinois was not even a state yet. So it kind of was making me laugh to think about these explorers, looking at, in some places, I don't know how they are by you, but where I am, just walking into my office this morning, I managed to bring one in with me because they were flying all over and around the trees. So I'm just trying to imagine what these explorers must have thought as they're making their way, checking out these new purchases, these new territories that they were assigned to go out and check out. And all of a sudden the trees just start screaming. How deafening that must have been for them, and just, really must have wondered what they'd gotten themselves into. So as I mentioned, there are 13-year and 17-year, but they are all of the genus Magicicada, which I always think is kind of fun because it sounds like magic cicada. They don't always count correctly. However, sometimes they have what are called stragglers, where they'll come out a couple years early or a couple years late. And it's interesting because there is a group of stragglers that is building. We may end up with a new subbrood. It's farther out east, but they were supposed to come out in 2000 and they came out a couple years early. So, or actually, they were supposed to come out in 2004 and they came out 4 years early in 2000. And then everybody was interested to see, oh, they're going to come out 13 years later. They're going to go back to 17. But they came out again 17 years later. So we'll see what happens in 2034 if they continue coming out every 17 years. We may have a new little subbrood going. There are 7 species that can all be seen in Illinois this year, 4 in the 17-year group and 3 in the 13-year group. They have slight differences in appearance, mostly on the abdomen. So if you're able to pick them up, look at the underside. Some have an all black underside, some have orange stripes on the underside. That can help you differentiate which is which. But they're definitely have different sounds. So I've seen a couple of YouTube videos that will play the sounds next to each other so you can hear what the different sounds are like. One of them kind of sounds like a foghorn to me. Another one reminds me of one of those sprinklers that goes tss, 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 tss. And then so they all have different kinds of sounds. So that's one way you can tell which ones you're seeing. And they do feed on xylem for a long time. We didn't think they ate anything, but now we know they do. They did some really cool studies looking at freshly molted ones that had not eaten anything, and then looking at them a few days later and actually finding apple tree DNA inside them. So they could prove then that they were consuming food after they became adults. A lot of insects don't. So we also have the annual or dog day cicadas. These are the ones, they come out every year. Even though we call them annual, it's not the young of the previous year that are coming out every year. Sometimes they're underground for 2 years or 5 years. The point is, every year we have a brood of these, but they come out during the dog days of summer, so July through October. And there's over 3,000 species of those kinds of cicadas, with 22 of them here in Illinois. And they also will feed a little bit on xylem. So despite them feeding, though, and here I'll show you, you can see there they have that straw-like mouth part. They really don't eat very much. If you think about how much sap we take out of a maple tree just to make maple syrup, they're really taking out almost nothing. That's not where the damage is going to come from on your trees and shrubs. That's going to come from their egg laying. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But there's a number of different species that they will feed on. But again, even though they're feeding on them, that's not what's going to cause any issues on your trees and shrubs. All right, let's take a look at this map a little bit closer here. This map, or the first brood, was named in 1893 by Charles Marlatt from the Department of Ag. And so this is really only, I want to say, the 9th time they've come out since they've been named, which is just kind of crazy to think about. If we expand our Illinois map here, you can see definitely the state is really divided. So we have that 17-year in the north, 13-year in the south. I don't know that we actually know where the overlap is going to happen, and it's only going to be in a really small area. I have seen maps very confidently predict those counties like south of Kankakee, so Coles, Douglas, down around there. I have seen other maps very confidently say Champaign. I have seen other maps very confidently say Springfield. I truly don't think we know for sure. Again, this hasn't happened in over 200 years, and they weren't really concerned about this back then. So I don't think we know exactly where that overlap is going to happen. So, needless to say, it is not where you are, and it's not even where I am in DuPage County. So, all right. So, we're going to take a look at a video here. This is a time lapse video of the final molt of a brood 10 cicada. So, this was one of the ones that came out a few years ago. This time lapse was taken over a period of about 4.5 hours one night. They do generally like to emerge at night or to come out of their exoskeleton at night because um, they are really susceptible to being eaten at this point in time, right? They're very soft at this point. Their exoskeletons haven't hardened yet. And so if you're planning on eating them, that's the time to do it. They call that the teneral stage. So that very pale white stage that came out. I've seen a bunch of people posting pictures of them saying, "Oh, I found a cicada that's all white. It's a special albino cicada." Well, no, his exoskeleton hasn't quite hardened yet. So, um, but again, this took about 4.5 hours for it to really fully come out and harden up and be ready to fly off. So again, they like doing it at night. Sometimes they do it during the day too, but it's much more common for them to come out in the evening. All right. I am going to geek out a little bit on ecology here. If you start to feel this going over your head, just feel free to space out for a couple minutes. But I think this part is kind of cool. So the question is, why are they underground for 17 years? Why does it take them 17 years to get all the way through their life cycle? And the answer is we don't really know for sure. There's a couple of possibilities. One, by coming out en masse like this all at once, it's predator satiation. So everything is going to eat these things, right? Everything. And if they come out all at once, well, they're guaranteed some of them are going to survive because if there's a million of them, other animals can't eat them all. So they just come out so many at once to guarantee some of them are going to survive. Now, another thought is this sinking of populations. So it's a way to outlive their predators. Now, in ecology, there's this idea of cycles. So the most common one to talk about is rabbit versus coyote populations. So if you look at that graph on the left, let's say we have a really great spring. We have tons of dandelions. What eats dandelions? Rabbits. Rabbits are just gorging themselves on dandelions. There's plenty of food for everybody. Tons of the young survive. And now we've got this boom in rabbit population. Well, because we have so many rabbits, now the coyotes who eat the rabbits, well, they've got a whole buffet. So they're going to eat, they're going to be satisfied, their young are going to be healthy and survive. Now we've got this big coyote population and they're going to eat all the rabbits. Now the rabbit population is going to fall. When the rabbit population falls, now the coyotes are starting to starve. Their population numbers are going to go down. But then now that the coyotes' numbers are down, the rabbits can rebound. And then the coyotes rebound. And it's just this big cycle that goes on and on and on. If you're cicadas, on the other hand, you come out en masse one year, just millions, billions all at once, right? They come out, everything eats them. So, if we say birds are just going to gorge themselves. I know I haven't had to fill my bird feeders in weeks because the birds just have, why go for the seed when you've got steak, right? So the birds are gorging themselves on cicadas. Well, the cicadas that survive are going to go underground, and they're going to be underground for the next 17 years. When next year's broods of birds come out, well, they're not going to have all these cicadas to eat. So their populations can never really sync up because those birds don't live for 17 years, right? So they're going to It's going to be their grandchildren, great grandchildren, maybe even great great grandchildren by the time these cicadas come back out again. So those populations, they can't sync up because they're just really too far apart. So just kind of a cool ecology thing that could also help to account for why these little guys are underground for so long. And as I mentioned, absolutely everything eats them, and they have no defenses. They don't bite, they don't sting, they're not toxic. All they can do is buzz and have a really, really long life cycle. And as I mentioned, absolutely everything eats them: birds, fish, snakes. Um, my dad shared a photo he took of a little brown snake that just was like bump, bump, bump. And it just, you could tell he had been eating cicadas. My dog eats them, birds everywhere, right? Absolutely everything is just going crazy over these things. Now, another question we have is, why are they so loud? Well, it's only the males that sing. And they have this little structure, if you can see under my thumb there, that little white structure, that's called a timbal. And it's right behind their wings. And they vibrate that structure, and that's what makes that sound. So it's not like grasshoppers or crickets that use sort of a rubbing motion. It's this timbal vibrating almost like a timpani head. Their sounds are species specific, and they can reach volumes of 100 decibels or even more. A friend of mine had a decibel meter that he held up, and he registered 101 decibels just the other day, which is above the OSHA allowed volume. But it's basically like the volume of a loud lawnmower. So there is a tree in my neighborhood that is just crawling with them. It is incredibly loud underneath, to the point I was actually uncomfortable standing underneath this tree because of the volume. So they are, they're really, really loud. The females don't sing, but they will make a clicking sound to indicate her choice of mate. So the males go up into the trees and they start to sing their hearts out. The females listen for that sound, that song that says, I'm your same species. And she goes over, she looks over her choice of males, she finally picks one she likes, and then she goes over and goes like click, click, click with her wings. And that is her mate now. So after they mate, we now have the next generation. Now, this is where the damage to your trees and shrubs is going to come in. So I actually took these pictures on my own trees, unfortunately. This is a blue beech, also called a musclewood tree, that I have in my yard. If you look there along that stick, those are where the female has taken her ovipositor, that her egg laying structure, and made slits in the branches in which to lay the eggs. So you can just see it's just slit after slit after slit. And, so there's probably 100 eggs inside that branch. And where that arrow was pointing, that is the ovipositor. So it almost looks like one of the legs back there, but if you count, she's got one too many legs. So it's not a leg, that is her ovipositor that is sawing a little slit into that branch, into which she will lay about 10 to 20 eggs at a time. Again, up to about 500 to 600. After about a month, then the adults are going to die. And then the eggs will hatch about 6 to 10 weeks after they are laid. Then afterwards, here you can see how tiny those eggs are there. So each one of those little slits in that branch will hold anywhere from 10 to 20 eggs. And then once they hatch, that's what the young are going to look like. They're really pretty tiny, and they're going to drop to the ground, burrow down about 8 to 12 inches, where they're going to be feeding on the tree roots for the next 13 or 17 years. So they're very, very tiny when they are first hatched, but over time, they will grow to the size that we see them afterwards. Now, according to the Morton Arboretum, they will lay their eggs in really quite a few different trees. What they don't like are conifers. So things like pine, spruce, and fir, mainly because the sap in them is so thick and viscous, it will overwhelm the eggs. So they need something that's got a much thinner, um, a thinner sap to it. So things like maple, ash, hawthorn, cherries, and so on. You know, dogwood, walnuts, willows, lindens, they'll use all of them, including exotic ornamentals, roses they'll use, cotoneasters, forsythia, ginkgo. Again, not picky as long as the sap isn't going to overwhelm the eggs. So, of course, everybody wanted to know how to protect their trees and shrubs. I would say at this point in time, if you are hearing and seeing cicadas around, it's probably too late. Um, but if you're really concerned about your plants, you can cover them. You wrap them in something like tulle or a very fine mesh, something like window screen, or they sold mesh bags online that you could put over your shrubs. I covered two of mine just because they had been planted recently. But large established trees and shrubs should be fine. It'll really just be like they're being pruned. So if they are, if they've been in the ground for more than 17 years, they've survived this already. If they are more newly planted, if they are very newly planted, they might suffer some damage, and enough that it could be catastrophic. So that was when we would recommend covering them. So, for example, I have a shrub that was planted just in the fall, and so I covered it just to be on the safe side. My beech tree that you saw before, that had been in the ground already for about 4 years. So I suspect the root system will be robust enough to help it recover from the damage that it's facing. And so hopefully, again, it'll just be sort of like being heavily pruned. So, and in the case, that kind of pruning actually makes many trees stronger. So apple trees, for example, have been known to produce more fruit in the following years. So if your tree's got a diameter of less than about 2 inches, again, or if it hasn't been in the ground for very long, might be worth covering. And then waiting to plant new trees and shrubs, I'm expecting they'll be gone by 4th of July. So, if you can wait to plant until then, you might be better off. Insecticides absolutely will not help. It really won't have any impact on the populations at all. They do such minimal feeding, and most insecticides depend on them feeding on the plants. So they really won't help. You're going to do more harm than good in that case. So really don't advise trying to do any kind of chemical control of them. And they do have some environmental benefits to them. So the emergence tunnels that they make as they're coming out can act as a form of natural aeration, right? We pay lots of money to get our grass aerated. And those emergence tunnels do a really nice job of it. And they're providing all kinds of food for wildlife, right? Absolutely everything eats them. My dog, coyotes, fish, uh, of course, birds, right? Absolutely everything. So it's a great source of food for wildlife. As we mentioned, it does do that sort of natural pruning for mature trees. So especially out in, say, forest preserves and things where the trees don't have any kind of tree services to help them. This is a form of natural pruning. And the decaying bodies, while they may have a bit of an odor to them afterwards, they do act as free fertilizer. So if you're wondering what to do with the piles of them afterwards, just sweep them into your flower beds and, maybe cover them with some mulch, and they will act as a free fertilizer. And of course, as they say, if you can't beat them, eat them. A friend of mine made the candied cicada recipe that was sent to you in advance of this. They are said to have an almond smell, or to taste like shrimpy asparagus. A friend of mine is also referring to them as tree shrimp right now. So the teneral adults are considered best. So as we mentioned, that newly emerged out of the exoskeleton, where they're still kind of light colored. If you're going to collect them to eat them, that's when you want to do it. They are low fat and they have a protein content that is similar to beef. But if you are allergic to shellfish, you should avoid them because they can have similar proteins and things that can cause allergic reactions. Um, Also, I would not go making these a staple of your diet as they can be potentially mercury accumulators. And you also probably don't want to collect where there's been heavy pesticide use because you always run into the risk of accidentally ingesting some of that as well. When you do collect them, you can blanch them, boil them for about 5 minutes, or if you're not going to use them right away, you can freeze them as well. So some of the recipes that I've seen online: emergence cookies, spicy popcorn cicadas, tempura cicadas, right? Pretty much anything you can do with shrimp, you can do with cicadas. If you are interested in learning more, there's a lot of great websites that you can go to out there. Cicada Safari is really nice because they've been having a sort of a citizen science project going on where you can report sightings of cicadas, where you saw them, or if you heard them, if you can ID them, that kind of thing. Just really a wealth of information at that Cicada Safari site. Of course, the University of Illinois Extension has all kinds of information for you as well. And again, also the other sites too. I have our DuPage County Master Gardener Help Desk there if you have questions, but you up in Lake County also have your Master Gardener Help Desk if you have any gardening questions. And with that, I wanted to make sure that I left plenty of time in this presentation to answer questions because I know lots of people tend to have questions with in and around cicadas. There have been so much misinformation out there about cicadas. It's kind of infuriating sometimes, but again, want to make sure we're getting correct information out there and able to answer any questions that everyone might have. And then that survey link there too just kind of helps me out. It shows my boss that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and actually teaching things. So if you enjoyed the presentation, that's how you can let us know. And with that, if we have any questions.
Can you see the Q&A? Or Jamie, do you want me to read them?
Oh, yes, I can. Okay, there we go. All right, so one question is, why do some places have cicadas and some places don't? That is a great question and one that I have been seeing a lot of. And the reason for that, again, has to do with the trees, right? So in my neighborhood, I live in the older section of my neighborhood. It was built around 1992, possibly even, I think it was around like 1992-ish. So before that, it was farmland. So we have been through a cicada cycle already. And so there were some here already. There are some old mature trees around, and because they only go about a half mile in their entire life. So it's not like these things are able to migrate if something happens to their tree. So if where you live was nothing but farm fields for the last 100 years, well, there's nothing around for the cicadas to eat. So you're not going to have them in your area. If you are in an older subdivision that has lots of mature old trees, then you probably have populations of them in the ground throughout the years that have been able to survive to adulthood. So, trees are really just so important, and we are losing these mature trees by the day because of development, because of storm damage, because, 100 different reasons. So in areas that have been heavily farmed for 100 plus years, they just don't have the trees that can support that many cicadas. So that's basically why. Um, Andrea wants to know, we haven't really seen any here in Lake Zurich, so is it still possible they're come, or is it safe for me to uncover my new trees? I would say if you're not hearing them at this point in time, you're probably safe. Um, and even if one or two of them come through and just happen to use that tree, it's not going to be significant enough damage. If you're not seeing them in the massive numbers like I am in my yard, you're probably safe to take that netting off. Jean wants to know, why are the eyes red? That is a great question, and not one that I have seen an answer to. The simplest answer is it has to do with the pigments that are there. And so we're seeing lots of reports of blue-eyed ones here and there, which would be a genetic variation. But as to the specifics of, why the eyes are red, I'm not really sure. I haven't seen any discussions about that at all. Any other questions? Okay, another, how quickly can the population spread to areas that don't currently have them for the future 17-year cycles? So yeah, that's a really great question too. As I mentioned, they don't move more than about a half mile. So if you have mature trees that can support them, if you have trees that are, we'll say, mature enough that they can lay their eggs in them, have the eggs fall to the ground, and then have that undisturbed soil for the next 17 years, they're not going to move very far. So it would take them a long time, and this goes with, people were saying with climate change too. If we look at the maps, they don't go very far into Wisconsin. And I suspect it's because of the frost line, because they're underground. If the soil freezes too far down, they can't survive that freezing. So they can't go into Wisconsin very far, or, Michigan or Minnesota, because of where that frost line is. So with climate change, even as that frost line moves further north, it's going to take them a really long time to be able to spread that far. So if we start seeing issues on the other side with climate change impacting the forests and the trees in this area, as we start to lose those, it's going to be hard for the populations to adapt because they can't move very far. So yeah, it's really interesting. It's an interesting situation. All right. Will grub control lawn products kill the nymphs that are underground? Yes. Yes, they will. We tend to think of grubs as being those vicious things that are eating all the roots of our plants and, all bad guys. And they're not. Some of those grubs that are in the soil are lightning bugs. Some of them are cicadas. Some of them are, other what we would consider good bugs. So we really need to be thoughtful when we're using these products in our yard, that we don't need to treat for every little product or every little problem. So, definitely if you've got an overabundance of things that's causing lots of damage, then you may consider using these kinds of grub control products. But definitely something to think about. Okay, let's see. Hope wants to know, do you think the summer would be more noisy due to many number of cicadas? Well, where I live right now, it is incredibly noisy. obviously with noise we don't usually have. Once they're gone around the 4th of July, we'll have a break. We'll get a few of the annual cicadas, but the annual cicadas won't be anywhere near the number of the periodical cicadas um, that we're having right now. So in that case, it's going to be a typical year for annual cicadas. Let's see, the websites posted. So I didn't have the websites from my last slide. Let's see if we can go back. Here we go. Cicada Safari is just cicadasafari.org. And these, a quick Google search of any of these names along with cicada will get you their cicada information. All right. Any other questions? But yeah, that's the Cicada Safari site. If you are interested in learning more, they have just a ton of information, all the different broods, lots of really great sites there. And that citizen science project is really cool as well.
Well, thank you, Jamie. Hopefully everyone received the handout too that Jamie included with her presentation tonight. If you didn't get it, just let me know and I could resend it tomorrow. As I mentioned earlier, I will definitely post tonight's video up on our website the next day or two so you can check it out. Other than that, hopefully we'll see everyone Wednesday between 4 and 6 at the library for some free gelato. Thanks again, Jamie. Hope you have a good evening and good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.